Welcome to the Customer and Supplier Processes webinar. Throughout this webinar, we'll be looking at how to use QuickBooks to keep track and record any sales into our businesses, as well as any expenses we may incur, following some simple processes so that we can effectively manage the cash flow in our businesses. We'll first of all begin by focusing on the customer process. Before creating an invoice or sales receipt for my customer in QuickBooks, I will first of all need to create a list of items and services that I sell in my business. To begin, I need to click on the Items and Services icon. Alternatively, from the main toolbar, you can also click on List and then Item List. This will open the Item List dialog box as shown on screen. To add in an item, I simply need to click on the Item menu in the bottom left-hand corner. I then click on New. QuickBooks considers an item to be anything that a company buys, sells, or resells in order to run the business. Items can be products, services, charges like shipping, handling, subtotals, or discounts. To add in a service I provide and charge for, such as specialised labour, consulting hours or professional fees, I will select Service. Generally, when entering an item or service, the following information will be required. In the Name field here, I'll record the name of the item. In this example, I'm going to record labour. Please note that the item name number will not appear on my customer's invoice when I print in. In QuickBooks Premier 2012, there is an additional field to enable a unit of measure. If this is enabled, the rate will correspond to that measure, for example, an hourly rate. The next field is Description. This is what the customer will see on the invoice once it is printed or emailed. This can be recorded when setting the item if the description is always going to be the same, or it can be manually typed on the invoice stage. The rate or price can be entered if this is a set amount, and if the amount changes regularly, it can be manually typed at the invoice stage. Sales VAT code. This will only appear if the VAT settings have been turned on. QuickBooks makes it easy to track VAT by assigning a VAT code to each transaction or line item where VAT applies. These codes are automatically created by QuickBooks and are recorded on every transaction. I will then use the Account field to tell QuickBooks where this item will be posted in the chart of accounts. Typically, I will use a revenue or sales general ledger account on a service item. There are also a number of other items that you can record in QuickBooks. For example, stock part. This will be used to track any item that needs to be tracked perpetually. This is for items that you buy that you will then turn around and resell to customers, either alone or part of an assembly build. We will cover this in greater detail later in the webinar. Non-stock part. This can be used for goods or products that you sell which are not to be tracked by stock. These can include office supplies, products and materials. Other charge can be used to record miscellaneous labour and materials such as shipping and handling fees, setup fees, service charges or late payment fees. I can use the subtotal amount type to total all items above on the form, up from the previous total. This is useful in applying a percentage discount or surcharge to the subtotal. The discount total can be used to subtract a percentage or fixed amount from a total or subtotal. For example, I could use this for a customer discount for a promotional offer or CIS deductions. Please note, if you add a discount item, you will need to record the item against an expense account from the chart of accounts, so that it shows as an expense on our profit and loss report. Alternatively, you can use a contra revenue account so you can net the two together on the profit and loss. I can use the item group to quickly enter a group of individual items that are often sold together, instead of having to individually type each item on an invoice. The item type for payment is used to record partial payment on an invoice, for example, a deposit that is received at the time of sale and therefore reduces the amount owed to me on an invoice. VAT item is used to track additional VAT rates, while VAT group is used to calculate and individually track 2 or more VAT items that apply to the same sale. Now that I've recorded my item labour, I will save it to the item list by clicking OK. As you can see on my screen now, this will show as a service in my item list. I'm now ready to create my invoice. To raise an invoice, I can start by clicking on Create Invoices from the main home page. Alternatively, you can also click on Customers from the toolbar, then select Create Invoices. My first step is to begin by choosing the customer whom I wish to invoice. As you can see, if I've forgotten to add the customer, I can simply select Add New to add any other customers. On the right-hand side of my invoice template, I can see a range of different invoice templates that I can use from. Below is the invoice date and invoice number. These fields can also be manually amended. QuickBooks will remember my invoice numbers for me and generate the next number automatically. Information can now be added to the invoice by choosing the item that I wish to charge for from the drop-down arrow. I'm going to imagine that I'm invoicing my customer for labour. I will then use the description field to type the detail of what I was invoicing for. What I can then do is this detail or description will show on the customer's invoice when it is printed or emailed. You'll notice that QuickBooks will automatically calculate the VAT on our invoice for us. If the amount of the invoice includes VAT, ensure that the Amounts Include VAT box is ticked, or the VAT will be added on top of the amount. To send the invoice on to the customer by email, I would simply press Send button at the top of the screen. Once the invoice has been sent, I can then select Save or Close, or press Save and New to raise another invoice. Please note, for an invoice that requires CIS deductions to be recorded, you can use the following process. Once again, we need to complete our invoice. I will then add in the labour charges. You can now use the subtotal item so that the discount only applies to the amount of labour charges. Lastly, I'll need to enter CIS as a discount item. What I can then do is enter in any other charges that are required, for example, materials. Once I've completed that, you'll then see that that percentage for CIS has been entered onto the invoice. That's my invoice completed. I will then press Save and Close. In some industries, such as a nursery, gym or property services, you may have invoices which consistently remain the same and get sent out to many customers each month. Instead of having to create each invoice one by one, which was how we used to do it with the pre-QuickBooks 2012 versions, you can now use QuickBooks to create one invoice and send to all your customers in one batch.